Huntington's disease is a nucleic acid disease. It's an autosomal genetic disorder that affects the nervous system, usually the brain. The mutation in the Huntington disease is the excessive amount of repeated portions of DNA known as the GAC repeat. Autosomal inheritance is when the disease is inherited through a mutation that occurs in one of the autosomal chromosomes. In Huntington's case, it's chromosome 4. It's a dominant gene that only one mutated copy of the gene is needed to pass on to the offspring for the disease to manifest. This means that if a child is born to a parent that carries the gene, the child is 50% more at risk to inherit the condition. This disease affects equally men and women. A chromosome is a deoxyribonucleic acid molecule, better known as DNA. DNA contains genetic material and units of heredity. Humans contain 45 sets of chromosome pairs along with one pair of sex chromosomes. Each parent passes 23 chromosomes to their children that are different than theirs. And poof, a new gene combinations are created by the crossing over of each parent's chromosome that occurs in meiosis. Each chromosome is made up of a nucleotide sequence, which is a combination of letters that indicate the order of nucleotide formation. So a little bit about nucleotides. They are a class of organic compounds that is made up of nitrogen-containing unit base, linked to a sugar and a phosphate group. Nucleotides are the building blocks of a nucleic acid and is made up of DNA. The two families of nucleic acid is RNA and DNA. The sequence of nucleotides in the DNA and or RNA codes for its structure of proteins. The nitrogen-containing bases of nucleotides are derived from heterocyclic compounds, pyrimidine and purine, depending on whether they have one or two rings. In DNA bases, we have adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine. In RNA, there will be uracil instead of thymine. These bases always have a beta-glycosidic linkage on the carbon. The 5-carbon sugar is always a monosaccharide of either ribose or deoxyribose. The difference is that on carbon 2, there is either a hydroxyl group or not, and the phosphate group is linked on carbon 5. These are monomers that make up nucleic acids. These monomers are connected by a phosphate ester that links the nucleotides together. This allows a linkage of bases to form together and make a sequence of bases such as GAC. These bases are paired up in DNA as complementary strands, linking adenine and thymine together in cytosine and guanine. A GAC repeat is a group of neurodegenerative disaffects that is characterized by the repetition of nucleotides cytosine, adenine, guanine, and specific genes. GAC trinucleotides repeat on the exon 1 when the gene is encoding a protein of Huntington. GAC encodes for amino acid glutamine, so the mutation will end up producing a long stretch of glutamine residues that is attached to the amino terminal of the Huntington protein. This string varies in length between the generation and corresponds to the severity of the drug. Normally, Huntington protein will contain less than 27 repeats, while carriers have anywhere between 27 to 35 repeats, and over 40 repeats will produce the disease. If there is a 40-plus GAC repeat, the individual will get Huntington's disease and risk passing on the gene. 36 to 39 repeats, the individual may not or may get Huntington's and still risk passing on the gene. 27 to 35, the individual will not have Huntington's but still have a small risk of passing the gene on. And less than 27 repeats, the individual will not get Huntington's and there is no risk of passing Huntington's gene on. Symptoms for HD usually appears between the age of 30 to 50 years old, and over time will worsen over a 10 to 25 year period. When symptoms come into play, it is a sign that testing should be done, or if there is a history of Huntington's disease in the family. To diagnose this, a healthcare professional may perform a neurological exam and ask about the person's family's history or any symptoms. The test test will look for signs of the disease. Also, genetic testing may be done to help determine if the person has the abnormal gene. Currently, there is no cure for Huntington's, nor is there any way to stop the disease from progressing. Treatments may be an effective way to help with common symptoms. Some medical treatments can help lessen the involuntary movement, ease mood swings and irritability, and some individuals take antidepressants for depression. There have been some discoveries that may show possible ways of slowing down or stopping the condition by switching off the defective gene, but there is still new research ongoing for new treatments.
Symptoms for Huntington's disease can start at any age, but with adults, the most common ones are involuntary jerking or writhing movements, muscle problems such as rigidity or muscle contraction, slow or abdominal eye movements, impaired gait, posture, and balance, and difficulty with physical production of speech or swallowing. Cognitive disorders or impairments often associated with Huntington's disease include difficulty organizing, prioritizing, or focusing on tasks, the lack of flexibility or the tendency to get stuck on a thought, behavior, or action. Also, lack of impulse control that can result in outbursts, acting without thinking, and sexual promiscuity. The lack of awareness of one's own behaviors and ability are also common. Slowness in processing thoughts or finding words, and difficulty in learning new information. Psychiatric disorders tend to come along with Huntington's disease. The most common disorder associated with the disease is depression. Depression appears to occur because of injury to the brain and subsequent changes in brain functions. Signs and symptoms may include feeling of irritability, sadness or apathy, social withdrawal, insomnia, fatigue, and loss of energy, along with frequent thoughts of death and dying of suicide. Now that we've talked about Huntington's disease with adults, it is time to talk about the symptoms of juvenile Huntington's disease with people 20 years of age or younger. The start and progression of Huntington's disease in younger people may be slightly different from that in adults. Problems that often present themselves early in the course of the disease include behavioral changes and physical changes. Behavioral changes linked with Huntington's disease are loss of previously learned academic or physical skills, rapid significant drop in overall school performance, and behavioral problems. The behavioral problems can occur at home with the family or at school. The juvenile physical changes are common with contracted and rigid muscles that affect gait, especially in young children. Another one is changes in fine motor skills that might be noticeable in skills such as handwriting, drawing, or eating. Tremors or slight involuntary movements are common, and seizures happen at significant rates. Complications come with Huntington's disease. After the person has started his symptoms, a person's functional abilities gradually worsen over time. The rate of the disease progression and duration varies. The time from disease emergence to death is often about 10 to 30 years. Juvenile Huntington's disease usually results in death within 10 years after symptoms develop. The clinical depression associated with Huntington's disease may increase the risk of suicide. Some research suggests that the greater risk of suicide occurs before a diagnosis is made and in middle stages of the disease when a person has begun to lose independence. Eventually, a person with Huntington's disease requires help with all activities of daily living and care. Late in the disease, he or she will likely be confined to a bed and unable to speak. However, he or she is generally able to understand language and has an awareness of family and friends. The common causes of death include pneumonia or other infections, injuries related to falls, and complications related to the inability to swallow. Thank you for listening and watching our cartoon on Huntington's disease.